Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. Today's episode is a special look at the club's youth setup, and it's probably arguably, maybe not even arguably, the real success story of the entire football club this season. Just to lay the table for you, both the under-18s and the under-21s have finished high enough in their respective leagues to qualify for the end-of-season playoffs. The 21s are in action on Friday, the 18s on Saturday. So with all the doom and gloom around the first team, we thought we'd have a deep dive and have a look at those playing a couple of levels down the club. And for that, I'm joined by a man you will all know, a Blues reporter of Christmas past, a former media manager at Birmingham City, and a friend and colleague and sometimes opponent, Colin Tattum. How are you doing, Tat?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me. All very well. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks for your time today. Most of you know Tats is committing his encyclopedic knowledge about Blues and his passion for the club to virtual paper at the moment. Where can we find your blog, Colin?
A WordPress blog. Keep Right On, funnily enough. 1875 is the handle. So, just a little bit of labour of love and just a few musings and a few reminiscence, really. So. Yeah, and it's been quite therapeutic as well, Brian. So thanks for the little plug. Anybody wants to have a look at that, and all thoughts and views welcome.
Heaven knows we all need a bit of therapy in following this football club. As I've said, we've invited Colin on because Colin, I think I'm right in saying, mate, you've seen the vast majority of 21s and 18s games this season. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. I've watched most, I'd say 90% of the home games for both teams, and I've gone to a fair few away games as well, and then I've caught up on other ones on Huddle, the sort of analysis service that all clubs use. So fairly au fait with both teams, and it's been quite enjoyable to watch them.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll start with the 18s, but we'll probably spend more time on the 21s because obviously, though, that squad will have more players and names that people will recognise and are, by definition, closer to the first team as well. But we will go chronologically and start with the 18s. So the Martin Lawrenshaw's under 18s finished top of their professional development league North section. I think I'm right in saying. They won 21 of 31 games, and they now face a playoff against Bristol City. That's at St Andrews on Saturday. I think it's a midday kickoff, but if you do commit to going to that, do check first. Charlton and Barnsley are in the other semi-final. They've had a really good season, haven't they, Colin? What have been the keys to their campaign? Would you say, mate?
I'd say a lot of things falling together at the right time. Last season, the under-18s were second from bottom in the division, and this season, from pretty much first to last, they've topped the league and they've stormed the league the way that they've played. It's been pretty eye-opening. I think a lot of it is down to a lot of the second year scholars had good experience last year playing in the 18s and in the 21s. That stood them in good stead. And also pre-season, they went away to Largs in Scotland, and it was very fruitful. A lot of demands were set upon them about standards, how they wanted to play. And also, Brian, a lot is down to recruitment. This is a very strong group. A lot have come all the way through from pre-academy, so they know each other's game inside out as well. And as I said, the style of play suits the personnel they've got, and they hit the ground running. I remember one pre-season game against Nottingham Forest at Wast Hills. It was 6-0, and Forest were Cat 1 side, and they just sort of ran all over them. It was pretty eye-opening. And Warren Joyce, who's been around the block, is the Forest 18s coach. After one flying tackle went in on one of his players, he sort of turned and said to no one in particular, he says, "What's wrong with this lot? They're like a bunch of angry kids." and that sort of stuck as the moniker for them all season, and they've lived up to that sort of badge of honour, if you want, because They're a difficult team to play against, aggressive, competitive, especially early on in the season. The results were based around a real high front four. It was almost 4-2-4, and a big press, and teams just couldn't cope. So really, it's been a collective thing. Everything's fallen into place. But to be honest, I don't think anybody expected this level of success and this level of dominance in their division.
Yeah, they've won it by 10 points, haven't they? Are they the best 18s team that you've seen this season?
I would say when Birmingham City have their full strength under 18 side out, they can beat anybody. Charlton Athletic, who topped the Southern section, are a very strong team, a very good team, and Bristol City, the playoff semi-final opponents, they got to the FA Youth Cup semi-final. But I would back that group against anyone, in the right circumstances. Again, and just another stat for you: away from home, played 16, won 13, drawn 3, scored 40-odd goals, conceded 15. That's pretty special to go through a whole campaign not to lose away from home.
Yeah, that was testament to character as well, isn't it? As much as organisation and anything else. Tats, inevitably people want to know names and who the lads that have stood out this season, which is not quite the same question as asking for your thoughts about who might come through and eventually play for the first team. But just the first part, who are the crucial players in that 18s team at the moment?
Yeah, a lot of Blues fans might recognise some of the names because several of the boys have had exposure to under-21s football last season and this season. If I go from the back, you've got Byron Pendleton, a really forceful, athletic right back. He signed an early pro in October. Byron was a winger. He was like Andrei Kanchelskis at young ages. He was that quick. He's been a key player. And then in midfield, Cameron Eubank, converted striker. They've played him into converted him into a holding midfield role. And he's like a Martin O'Connor type with bells on. I mean, the amount of running he gets through and the competitive nature that Cameron brings to the team, he's a real heartbeat. And then you've got a couple of other midfield players, Menzi Mazwi and O'Shea Ellis, both of whom currently are regulars with the 21s, which the knock-on effect there being, that takes away a little bit something from the 18s, of course. Menzi's a very, as an impish, elusive midfielder, takes the ball, turns away and runs with it. He's also played left back, and O'Shea is he spots a pass, defence splitting passes. He's like a stately player, if you want, a sort of, he could be a Tom Huddleston type. A little bit easy-ozy on occasions. You need to give him a little bit of a jab to get him going, but he's got a lot of talent. And then up front, the two lads, Ben Wadsku, who the club brought in last season from grassroots. He was at an academy in, I think it was Leicestershire. I think he's done very well, Ben, a rangy striker. And then you've got another kid called Frank Tattum, who has also, like Ben, scored a fair few goals to sort of at the tip of the spear for the team. So those have been the sort of mainstays of the 18s. But I really have to say it's a cliche, but it has been a team effort, and a lot of the under-17s, the first years have come in. People like Zaid Betteke, a really talented dribbler. There's a lot of other younger lads. Billy Brown that's come into defence, a sort of Gary Breen, Glenn Roeder type player. He's done very well of late. So across the board, it's a really strong group, and it's a real competitive group. And the lads play very good football, but they also play, for one another, and they do play, as the cliche goes, they play for the badge as well. There's a lot of Blues fans in that group.
Yeah, so a lot of fans could get quite attached to the qualities you've described there, and not least the fact playing for the badge. Just to brief people, Colin's obviously made reference to Frank, who does share a surname largely on account of him being Colin's son. We've decided to go easy on Colin and probably on Frank as well. I don't think it'd be too fair to do too deep a dive on a single player. So we're just going to obviously mention the stuff that he's done, which Colin's done there, but not focus on too much on one player, which would be unfair, as I said, to both parties and all the other lads that have contributed so much this season as well. The answer to this question might be the same. And Colin, have a few of those got a chance of going on? At this stage? I know so much can go wrong. Things change, clubs come in, injuries happen. Off-field things affect things. But have some of them got a chance of coming through at this stage, do you feel?
It's an interesting one, Brian, because obviously the landscape at the club is changing in terms of the monetary aspect. But obviously I know we're League One as is, but the ambition is much greater than that. So it'll be possibly tougher for a lot of these boys to make the breakthrough. But there is a willingness at the club to to develop the youth and improve the whole everything around the academy. And I would say that without naming names, there are there's a few lads there who have got a chance, given a fair wind, a bit of luck with injuries and what have you. You do need those sliding doors moments for a young player, unless you're an absolutely outstanding talent, like a like a Jude Bellingham. But you do need a little bit of luck. But the very fact that this group has done well, the very fact that a lot of those boys, were playing 21s football at 16 and 17, tells you something. And I think, and another significant fact that obviously I'm sure we're going to mention anyway, but all of those second-year boys, 14 in all, have all been offered professional contracts, which has never happened before at the club. But I think that just shows that how they are felt, in what regard that they are felt by people within the club, within the academy, because obviously they're not the finished articles, but there is a lot of potential there. Another key under 18s, remiss of me failed to mention, is Zach Willis, who's the captain, centre half, very comfortable on the ball, can play in midfield as well. Probably forgotten Zach because he's played the last couple of months consistently with the under 21s, while other lads have been out on loan and or injured, and he's done very well at that level as well. So again, you can see where I'm coming from. There's a lot of boys that have played 18s and 21s football, and also they have on occasions, like a lot of the 21s do, train with the first team. So the first team staff are certainly aware of the players that are coming through.
Yeah, indeed. Colin made reference there to the environment may be changing in the academy in the coming years. If certainly things will change if the club goes Cat 1, and we'll come onto the club's hopes for to regain Category 1 status later in today's discussion. But yeah, so just to recap on that. The 18s play against Bristol City at St Andrews on Saturday. I think it's a 12 p.m. kickoff, isn't it, Colin?
I believe so.
But do check that if you want to go and catch the lads down there. Which brings us to the 21s. They've also had a fantastic season. They finished second in the North section, winning 15 of their 30 matches to come runners up to Sheffield United, who were 8 points clear. But Blues they sealed the top their second place finish and their place in the playoffs with a couple of games to spare. So that it's been a very good season from that point of view. They now play Millwall, who won the Southern section. Again, quite convincingly. They'll play them at the Den on Friday night, and I think that might be a 7 p.m. kickoff. It's probably worth watching club channels to see if there are any plans to stream that. I'd be very surprised if the club weren't alive to the prospect of doing that. As people will know, that squad, the 21s, is coached by Steve Spooner. Has been for many years when he's not been called up to be caretaker to the first team. Yes, Steve has done a really good job with the level just below first team. What's their season been like, Colin? Clearly successful.
Yeah, very good, very strong start, and I think there's a tinge of disappointment amongst the 21s that they just fell away towards the end. That they were in pole position. Yes, Sheffield United had games in hand, but there were a couple of costly draws towards the back end of the season, and there was a pivotal game in March up at Sheffield, which unfortunately we lost. But they've, given as good as they've got all season. They've played some very good football. And again, they've got some good talents there, and whenever you go to watch the 21s, it's enjoyable, as it has been if you've been watching the 18s. You know that 21 level football and the demands is probably a little bit more technical. There's more ball playing. That there's probably more nicer football if you want, because what I've noticed in the under 18s level over the last few years, a lot of teams have gone very direct. Right. which is interesting. So 21s is a different type of football, but obviously, as you said, it's that next step down from the first team. So you've got players there who are really in the shop window for the first team staff, and trying to sort of push themselves on a little bit. But yeah, it's overall it's been a good season, and the nature of development stroke 21s football is the team often changes because a lot of the senior lads go out on loan, so they're not available for a large chunk of the season. I think we've seen it with Josh Williams, Marcel Oakley, Rico Brown, Tommy Fogarty, players like that. So there's a lot of mixing and matching as well, albeit at the start of the season it was a very settled team, a very strong team, and some of the results there gave the 21s the platform to lead the league and be in contention for the playoffs and ultimately secure a playoff berth.
Yeah, indeed. Just Colin made reference to it there. By the time you're getting close to the first team, sort of paths tend to diverge a little bit, don't they? And in terms of, Josh Williams might need a loan here, or Ramel Donovan might potentially, be needed by the first team, or someone's injured. So it does tend to be a mix or a match, and I don't think Steve Spooner would often get access to his best under 21s 11, would he?
Yeah, that's correct. And again, another lad who's been out on loan, gaining valuable experience, Brandon Keeler, who was an important member of the 21s, and of course made his debut, first team debut early in the season. So yeah, it's very much a balancing act, and obviously Steve Spooner and his staff will also look to go into the 18s to fill a few holes, and then to see if they can make that step up to the 21. So it is a very interesting, and it's a very difficult job as well in many respects, because as we said there, and if you throw in, obviously you'll always have a few injuries. Obviously it's a balancing act from one week to the next, and also you'll get the occasion whereby the first team will want some of their squad players to get minutes. So every now and again you'll get 5 or 6 first team fringe players all coming in, so then that knocks a couple of the 21s out of the picture, out of their squad. But overall for them this season, I mean, there's been very good performances, and again, not saying that some of these lads are going to be regulars in the first team, but they've given themselves a good chance in putting the question into the minds of the staff at the senior level.
Yeah, or indeed having a career elsewhere. Now, many of you might remember the fact that I think they were the 23s then, as opposed to the 21s, won these particular playoffs at Bramall Lane in 2021. They beat Sheffield United 2-0, courtesy of goals from Aidan George. And just to illustrate what Colin was saying there about success at 21s level doesn't necessarily transpire or crystallize into a first team setup, so into a first team career. I'm just going to run through the players that won at Bramall Lane that day, just to illustrate that. And I think there'll be some names that you'll recognise, and there'll be some names you think, gosh, I didn't even know they were at the club, or where are they now? But there was Oliver Basey in goal. Josh Williams played right back. There was a central defensive partnership of Joe Redmond and Geraldo Bajrami, both of whom, well, quite a few of them knew that they would be leaving the club before they even set foot on the pitch for that final. So it really was a kind of an emotional farewell. Ryan Burke, it was Ryan Burke, wasn't it, Colin, left back. Yeah, the midfield of Alfie Chang, Remy Walker, and Caelan Boyd-Muntz, and a front three of Kiki Simmons, Jaden Reed, and Aidan George, who got both goals. So names there that will stick out will obviously be Alfie Chang, and Caelan played a little bit of first team before going off to Middlesbrough. I think Joe Redmond's having quite a bit of success in Ireland now, and Geraldo. Geraldo is, I think, still is with Notts County, isn't he now?
I bumped into a Blues game the other week. Actually,
Right.
I think he did his ACL. I think he had a bad, or was it Achilles? I can't remember. I think he's out of contract, but I don't think he'll be short of offers. Again, he's a good player. Played first team level, of course, for Blues as well.
Indeed, and if ever a young man knows about it not being the setback, it being the comeback, it's Geraldo, isn't it? One of my favourite Blues stories is how Geraldo, as a kid, failed to get a place in the Blues Academy, I think 2 or 3 times, and eventually came back and convinced him to take him on. So yeah, so the key players, the key players of this team, please, Colin, who's been standing out?
We start at the back. The number 1 position, Brad Mayo, a real character. Brad, for me, he's been the 21's player of the season. Every game I've seen, he's tended to make an absolutely outstanding and/or important stop that's helped give the boys a platform to go on to get a result. And he's a Jordan Pickford-esque keeper. He's not a 6'4", one of these massive giants. But he's got a great reach, a great spring, and the way he talks and marshals the defence, and also has a bit of fun with referees, shall we say? It's he's a real character. I've got a lot of time for Brad, and he's very good with the younger boys as well that go into the 21s. He's demanding, but at that level you've got to be. So you've got Brad in goal. I think he's had an excellent season, and then the defence has changed recently because, as I said before, a lot of the lads have gone out on loan, but you've got Tommy Fogarty, who's a real good talent. He can play centre half, right back, forceful sort of defender. Rico Brown. Most recently, Laith Fairney. I'd describe Laith in the nicest sense as a old school defender, a bit like a Liam Day. He's left-footed, he'll head it and clear it all day long. He's a real competitor. Into midfield, Josh Home, ball playing CDM, as the kids say. He's been very pivotal in starting the attacks. He'll take the ball, gather it, and move it. When the 21s started the season, they played a sort of 4-2-3-1. He was one of the pivots, and he'd be very central to how the team would progress through the thirds. And then obviously you've got the sort of mercurial talent of Ramel Donovan, who we know has had first team experience. He's actually a first-year scholar, even though obviously he's a pro. So obviously he's younger, but as I said, he's such a live wire. He's got that sort of X factor, and he can turn games on his own. And then up front, Junior Dixon has scored a steady stream of goals this season. Very much a penalty box player, Junior. Most of his goals have come in the 18-yard box, but again, that shows that. He has a nose for being in the right place at the right time. I mean, those have been a few of the key players, but, there's been a lot of lads in and out of the team. Like I said, a Brandon Keeler, Josh Williams, Marcel Oakley, lads like that. And also, a Rico Patterson who's been around quite a bit and did very well in the early part of the season. Again, for me, he was one of the key players. And also, Shahid Kamara at the moment, unfortunately, Shahid's injured, but he came in and has done a very good job off the wide areas, especially the early to middle parts of the season. The 21s team, as we said, Brian, it has changed, transformed a little bit as the season has gone on. And of course, also, when you get into sort of April time, a lot of those lads will be aware of where their futures lie, whether they are going to be kept on, get new contracts with Blues, or they've been released. So that also impacts onto the makeup of the squad, and also, what team that Steve Spooner will be putting out.
The name that you mentioned there will leap off the page for most people because we've seen him play first team football And even if we haven't done that, we've seen some quite astonishing goals that he scored on social media. There's one that I still can't actually find the words to describe how he beat a defender to score from a ridiculous angle. But yeah, Ramel, the challenge is he's obviously a very, very gifted young man, but the challenge for any young player is when they go into the first team and then they get taken out of the first team is then how they respond to not being as close. What have you made of Ramel's body of work since he's come out of the first team setup?
He's done very well, actually. It would have been difficult, obviously. I think it's Tony Mowbray gave him his first start, didn't he? Was it the Hull game in the cup? Was it? And he played him as a false nine up front, really, which is not Ramel's position. I think he's best coming off the right, going onto his left foot, or maybe in a 10 role. But I think he's done well, having had that first team experience, played for the first team, and having all eyes on him, of course, when he comes into the 21s. Yeah. But that sort of thing doesn't faze him. He's got a bit of a swagger to him, Ramel. Yeah. Steve Spooner said after one of the games, that he's a free spirit. And whilst they want that, it's also everything else that goes with becoming a professional footballer around it. The work you have to do off the ball, where you're expected to be for the press, etc., and also your sort of attitude, application, training, and everything. So Ramel's learning everything, all that as he goes along. But undoubtedly, he's a talent, and he's a sort of player. And I keep smiling when I'm talking about him because he's like one of them larrikins. If you're an opponent against him, you don't like playing against him because he will make a mug of you, and he will also have the air of arrogance, as if like, come on, you can't get the ball off me. So yeah, he's definitely one to sort of watch out for, and hopefully, that he progresses as the club hopes he does. And of course, he's only 17, he's only 16, 17. So the older he gets, the more he's around that environment, the more that should help him as well understand that the other bits and bobs that he has to bring together to go with his undoubted talent to make that final leap into, becoming a first teamer or a first team squad regular.
Yeah, it's probably worth talking a little bit about the difference between 21s and first team, because so often, we could probably list between us 5 or 10 or 20 really talented lads that have come through the Blues Academy and not made it into the first team. How much do you think that success and standing out in a 21s game, how much does that count for in a Championship or League One or senior game?
That's a good question. I would say it does count for something, because if you're not doing well in the 21s, if the 21s are bottom of the league, losing every game, that probably tells you something as well about the standard of player you have. But it is making that jump is it's not easy. I think I said before, it comes to opportunity, and the more opportunity you do get, the more that you're around a first team, I think the more that the penny drops with players. I know I remember my lad last season went over to train with the first team, and I remember he said in the rondos, all of a sudden it was, wow, what's this? The speed of it was just something else. And I think he got nutmegged twice. And I think Harley Dean took pity on him and deliberately lost the ball so he could have a bit of respite. So that's a kid who was 16, 17. So you can imagine somebody like Jude Bellingham, how good, how naturally gifted he was to be able to cope with that. So it's not easy, but it's not insurmountable either. You look at JJ, brilliant, got an opportunity under Lee Bowyer in the first team at pre-season. Lee Bowyer took a fancy to him, says that kid's got something. The more JJ was around the first team, the sharper he got, the more he understood what it required to be. And then when he came back to play in his own age group, or the 21s, you could see he stood out a little bit. So it's a real balancing act. But, and as I keep saying, you do need that. You do need some belief in a club, in a manager, to give you an opportunity. And you do need a little bit of luck in terms of, those sliding doors moments and things fall right for you. So, but it's not easy. And I think, any player most lads, are signing their first professional contracts. They're under no illusions, they've not made it at all or whatever. But I think also from the club's perspective, and I think this is what will be happening at Blues, they will look at a template for clubs that have sold on their academy players, and that is, as we know, under P&S, it's called pure profit, isn't it? And I think that's something that Blues now under the Knighthead direction will be looking to do as well. So if some of those boys can't make that breakthrough, or there's people blocking their way, say we've gone out and signed somebody for 5, 6, 7, 8 million pounds in a certain position, then they will also, I think, look to develop these lads to sell on as well, to bring money in that way, to just to sort of keep the pot bubbling. So yeah, it's a bit of a long-winded answer there, Brian. Yeah, the step up is a big one, and I'm a believer that a good loan as well is massive to a young player's development at sort of 18, 21 level. If you get the right loan and you play men's football regularly, week in, week out, then again that's another eye opener for you.
Yeah, indeed. You make a good point there, actually, because you look at academies like Man City and Chelsea, and to an extent the other lot. They're making good money out of being a football farm almost, aren't they? And selling the likes of Philogene or Cole Palmer, or the ones that Chelsea have sold without ever really getting close to their first team. So yeah, that and as you say, it's free money, clear profit for the FFP calculation. Another player that you mentioned, and I pick him out because we're also desperate for a striker to come through the Blues Academy. Junior Dixon, what have you made of him this season? He's scored a lot of goals, and there's been quite a lot of social media talk, but the first team struggles for goals. There's a lad in 21 scoring goals, therefore, give him a go. Where's Junior on that spectrum?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that Junior hasn't had that opportunity, especially in the cup games. I think that's right. And I think when actually Steve Spooner was a caretaker as well, like you said, to put him on the bench and just to sort of give him that little bit of a carrot. I'm a little bit surprised because, as you mentioned there, Brian, I mean, up front at first team level, it's not been ideal in the front, in the striking areas, has it? So you do have somebody there in the 21s who has scored goals consistently. And I think Steve Spooner himself made reference to it fairly recently after one of the games. And whilst Junior has scored goals and he's done very well as the focal point up front, they also want more from his game in terms of link play, hold up play, leading the press, running the channel. So again, it's that complete package. Junior, don't forget, this is his first year as a pro. He came out of Crystal Palace last season to us, and he's done very well in terms of the stats for his goals. But I think they, and as I know as well, what they've said to my lad, it's not just about your goals; it's everything else. You have to almost try to be a complete centre forward, a Harry Kane, if you like. Everything that he does and more. So it's a difficult position as well, I'd say, to throw an 18, 19-year-old lad straight into the first team. In the white hot atmosphere of a championship battle and also a championship relegation battle. That's probably another thing I'd say as well. I think clubs in this season, Blues have probably gone for more experienced players. So yeah, Junior's in a good place in so much he's had a good season and he's shown his qualities. And in fairness to him, excuse me, over the last few weeks, he has also done that other side more consistently, and is improving week on week in terms of being an all-round centre forward. But I do get the clamour for it, and again, it's that sexy position up front, isn't it? If you're scoring goals, everybody sort of, there is a clamour for you. That's what happens, but it's not always as black and white as why player A, B, or C aren't getting a chance.
Colin, it's been decades since Blues have had a striker come through the academy. And who was the last one? Was it AJ?
I'd probably say, in terms of a pure striker front man, it would have been, Andrew Johnson.
We're going back 20 odd years, more than 20 years.
It is odd because the sort of throwback centre forward, the modern forward. He's a bit of an all-rounder. They like to play them anywhere across the front. They're not sort of poachers or rumbustious sort of 6'4" Mark Aitley, John Toshak figures, are they?
Yeah.
But anyone who can consistently stick the ball in the back of the net is worth their weight in gold. But as you said, it's been one of those odd ones for Blues of not really been able to sort of bring through a lad who's gone on to play in the first team on a consistent basis. Although there has been a number of lads who have scored goals consistently throughout their youth careers in the 18s and 21s. I'm thinking Carl McFarlane, Ronan Hale as well, albeit Ronan's doing very, very well over in Ireland. So again, it's not to say he's a failure. He's a very good footballer. He's going to have a good career. But yeah, it's I think, and we'd all love one of our own to come through to play up front with that number 9 shirt. They go on about it at Newcastle all the time, don't they? But it's just the same at Blues, the same at any club, I'd say.
Yeah, indeed. We've had a few, as you said, Josh. Ronan's had a good season, and there's actually transfer links with him coming back to England now. So that'll be interesting to see whether that happens. Carl McFarlane, don't think he even made a matchday squad. Josh Andrews, again, I thought Josh, you get to the classic case where you think, you get to 21s football, and I felt Josh, and obviously he's not a striker, but Geraldo was like this as well, where you've completed under 21s football and you just need to go and play first team football somewhere else. Go on.
There is that. I always think that sometimes players can sometimes stay too long within the 21s and they plateau out. That's why a loan is important. And Josh Andrews, always liked Josh, and at 16 he was a man. He was like, wow, this kid's going to be something. But again, he's had a few problems with injuries, but I'm pretty sure that he will go on to have a good league career. I always remember Richard Beale saying to him, look at the example of Matt Smith. If you're going to be that sort of centre forward, aggressive, attack the ball, which is what they used to say to Josh. You don't punch your weight for your size. Be a bit more aggressive. Be that traditional centre forward. Look at the example of Matt Smith, who's had a very good career. I think Josh, as long as Josh gets luck with injuries, I think he will be a very decent league striker.
Yeah, climbing his way back with Gillingham, Odin Bailey, not necessarily a striker, but another sort of attacker. Climbing his way back with Stockport. So, it's not necessarily the end of the road when these lads do leave Blues. Colin, I don't know whether let's talk about the Cat 1 thing, because the club have restated their ambition to regain Category 1 status, lost under the previous regime, is my personal opinion, and we don't necessarily need to go over the coals too much on this, but I don't feel like they're ever really ready for that Cat 1 status when they first got it. Is that achievable at Wast Hills? And I suppose they've got Henley and Arden now, haven't they? In terms of, it's not just having the amount of coaches or the best players. The infrastructure is just so demanding on the infrastructure. What goes into that Cat 1 application and process, and can Blues get that over the line, do you think?
They're looking to do it by 25, 26, isn't it? Which is going to be some going, but again, that's almost typical Knighthead. Like, we're going to do this, and let's do it as soon as we can. It's not going to be easy, because, as you mentioned, it's not just about the amount of coaches and staff that you have to have. It's everything else in place, and a lot of that is infrastructure. And as we know, let's face it, Wast Hills had just been left basically under the previous regime, and it was make do and mend the best you can. But they are pressing ahead with it. They've got a lot of plans for already the offices, the buildings, the redevelopment work after the fire at Wast Hills has been completed. Then they're going to go on to Blues are going to go on to a second stage. I think there's going to be more buildings, office space built. I believe this summer the 3G is being ripped up and replaced, because the remedial work that had to be done on it consistently over periods wasn't done. So it's not fit for purpose, but straight away they're doing it. And I believe the plans, I don't know 100%, for a sort of a mini stadium pitch at West Hills as well, and also probably a reconfiguration of a full-size indoor area, which is a requirement of Cat 1. So what I would say that it's full steam ahead, and there's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of pressure on everyone down there to get ready to meet the auditors' requirements, because it's critical. Because after Blues lost their license the last time, I think they were pretty much frowned upon by the auditors. But this is a new regime. They have different ambitions. They're serious people, and the resources and money is there to be spent on getting Blues up to speed at Cat 1. And also, apart from the coaching and the staffing levels, the facilities, they're also looking at recruitment as well, which has fallen by the wayside at Blues for the last 5-10 years. But now again, there's a plan in place, and I think Blues are going to be quite aggressive in the next few years, and basically bringing staff which they've just not had. Some of the stories that I'm sure you've heard about, the scouting and recruitment over the last few years at Blues, it's been frightening. But there's some very hard-working, good people there. Mike Rigg obviously has come in as academy technical director. I know he's impressed people with what he wants, his demands, and the sort of strategy, the overall strategy for the academy. But it will take time, because Blues have been behind the 8 ball at academy level. Even though we have brought some good players through over the years, we've been behind a lot of clubs, even just locally, on a lot of areas in the academy. But that is being addressed. How quickly we can get Cat 1, I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do fulfil that desire of getting the okay for 25-26 at the start of that campaign.
Yeah, and there's obviously the massive grand plan, £2 to £3 billion plan of getting the academy, near the new first team stadium and in the Wheels site and that area of Birmingham. So yeah, that is really exciting. Colin, it'd be remiss of me to let you go without asking your thoughts about the first team and the relegation, and not so much the relegation, but the prospects of being in League One now. I think we should probably push on with the narrative. But what were your takeaways from the season, and your thoughts about League One, and as the man who covered every inch of the country in 94-95, what a great season that was.
Yeah, we all know it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have come to pass. Circling the drain for quite a while, and it's just ironic that it happened when there'd been a complete ownership change. I think yourselves and a lot of people have gone through the reasons, the whys and wherefores, and it's been some very good analysis. And my biggest thing is, I suppose, I'm a little bit long in the tooth. I've seen a few relegations and promotions and what have you. And this one, I think, if Blues were going to get relegated, it's probably as well that we were relegated this season than last season. And I think everyone knows why I'm saying that, because I think we will have a better chance for coming back, and also a better chance to take stock, have look inward, and also, start the slate clean and fresh. It's not going to be easy to get out of League One, but I don't see why it isn't doable for Blues. And, it could be a ground zero, a reset for the club for a lot of levels. And as we've seen with the plans that, Knighthead want, and they're going to see through, it doesn't, relegation doesn't alter that focus. It's bizarrely, I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm uplifted, but I'm optimistic, even though it's League One, and it will hit home when there's a dreary away game at some godforsaken place in November. But why not? And the other thing that I've said to a few people, and you'll know this, Brian, when was the last time Blues had a winning season?
Yeah,
Chris Hughton's. You're talking 10 years. We've just been used to them losing, fighting relegation, losing at home 1-0. Oh, here we go again. Losing to this lot, that lot. Imagine a winning season. You get a bit of momentum from that. You saw what happened with Ipswich. It can be done. So whilst it's not ideal, of course, and in terms of growing the revenue that is very important to Knighthead, it's not ideal. But it's not the end of the world as it may have been in previous years.
Embarrassing rather than existential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Indeed. Colin, I've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you very much for joining us. Just remind us again where people can find your stuff, please, mate.
Yeah, it's just a WordPress blog. Keep right on 1875. So I'll be doing bits and bobs on that periodically. So yeah. But thanks for having me on, Brian. Good to chat to you as ever.
Pleasure. Do check out that blog, packed full of rare insight. A man who's followed Blues for many decades professionally and all of his life personally. So thanks, Colin. And it's a from both of us. It's a keep right on.